Imagine a child in a golden cage where every whisper turns into a sentence. It was there that a legend was born, one that would soon be whispered in the corridors of power. In a wild corner of the Carpathian Mountains, where centuries-old pine trees formed such dense thickets that sunlight only timidly touched the ground, a child was born whose fate promised to be harsh. He was the second son of Vlad II Dracula, ruler of Wallachia and member of the mysterious Order of the Dragon, called upon to defend the Christian world from the advance of the Ottoman Empire. Barely 11 years old, the boy was sent by his father to the court of Sultan Murad II in Adrianople. This was not a diplomatic maneuver. It was a cruel act of ransom for loyalty. Instead of affection, he was met with the silence of a foreign language and an alien religion. For the Ottoman Empire, he became a walking pledge, a symbol that Wallachia would not retreat before Turkish power. But for the young Vlad, it was only a harbinger of something much darker. Surrounded by marble columns and colorful mosaics, accompanied by the sounds of Eastern music and the scent of incense, his every step was monitored by guards. There was no mercy here. Lessons in reading, writing, and math were tools of power, and training in fencing, horse riding, and artillery turned the boy into a formidable weapon. Vlad's brother, Radul, quickly adapted to his new world. He learned Turkish, adopted the customs of the harem, and earned the favor of the young Mehmed, the future conqueror of Constantinople. Vladimir, however, harbored a cold rage inside him. Every beating, every night in the dungeon, every cry of the prisoners he heard through the palace walls only strengthened his usurped sense of betrayal. His young heart burned with pain. His father had given him away as a pawn. His native land had seemingly erased him from its chronicles, and God, it seemed, had also turned away. Historians have repeatedly mentioned his wanderings between dry cells and banquet halls, where executioners staged real performances of torture. He looked at the stripped skin of besieged cities and listened to the moans of hundreds of slaves. There, at the epicenter of the empire, Vladimir learned the most important thing. Fear is stronger than love, and death can be both art and strategy. At the same time, between lessons in strategy and poetry, he was instilled with the image of a loyal vassal. But the more he mastered the subtleties of diplomacy and command of the Ottoman gendarmes, the more acutely he felt another personality maturing within him. He mastered the ABCs of fear management, learned that well-timed whispers from courtiers were more important than any swords, and that the throne was held together by heartlessness. The nights spent in an isolated cell where he prayed over the ashes of his own baptismal records only added fuel to the fire of his determination. He saw himself not as a victim, but as the blacksmith of his own destiny, ready to forge a new power from the cruelty of the Ottoman Empire. Upon returning to Wallachia, he had no intention of becoming a noble leader. He dreamed of becoming someone who would strike unprecedented terror into the hearts of his enemies. His younger brother Radul grew up under the protection of the Sultan's court, while Vladimir silently forged the weapons of his own soul. His childhood ended on the day when the boy decided for the first time not to beg for mercy, but to prepare to dispense justice. Thus was born the future ruler whose name would long be spoken with fear and respect, Vladimir III Dracula, better known as the Chain Prince, whose legend was forged not by blood, but by the fire of his trials. Have you ever wondered how one man can turn fear into a weapon of control? Vlad the Impaler became a symbol of terror that made the whole world tremble. When Vlad the Impaler finally left the walls of the Ottoman palace, he did not emerge a free man, but a sharp blade, hardened by years of captivity. He took with him neither untold treasures nor an army, but gained a far more destructive knowledge, a new formula for power. In Constantinople, where he spent his youth as a hostage, he saw how an empire was built on blood and fear. He understood that pity does not breed obedience, that law without punishment is an empty sound, and that the love of the people can dissipate, while terror remains a poison for generations. Returning to Wallachia, his homeland, he found it a pawn in the hands of the Kingdom of Hungary to the west and the Ottoman Empire to the east. His father, Vlad Dracula, fell at the hands of treacherous boyars who changed allegiances as easily as they changed their shirts. His older brother Mircea was blinded and buried alive, and Vlad himself inherited a disgraced name and a disputed claim to the throne. But he did not return with an outstretched hand. He came to reclaim what had been lost. Instead of pomp and fanfare, he was met with whispers and suspicion, intrigue and hidden enemies. He realized that the peaceful path to power was closed. He needed allies, but even more than that, he needed to send a clear signal. They were not dealing with a boy, but with an unyielding force. With a cold gaze and a quiet voice, he began to pave his way. In the masquerade halls of the boyars, he memorized faces and treacherous names, not seeking immediate revenge, but making plans. The first years of his reign were a game of shadows, temporary alliances with Hungarian barons, bribery of small feudal lords, and a solemn oath to Christianity, only in words, but in his heart he nurtured a strategy. When the time came to remove Istanbul's protégé from the Wallachian throne, he did not rush into battle with the thunder of cannons, but carried out pinpoint actions, instant seizures and quiet threats, like a surgeon treating a sprawling tumor. With each victory, his name gained weight. He did not ask for favor, he demanded it. On the day of his coronation, after all the intrigues and struggles, he ascended the throne for the first time as the voivode of Wallachia. But even with the crown, he remained a warrior. All subsequent victories were only a prelude to war. The Wallachia he received was in ruins. Exhausted peasants, corrupt boyars, decrepit cities, and a disintegrated army. Most saw only ashes. But he saw a treasure trove of opportunities. With an iron fist, he introduced reforms that seem unthinkable today. He put corrupt tax collectors to the wheel, restored fair payments, and reduced the feudal privileges of the boyars. He banned theft, bribery, and treason on pain of death, sparing no one, no matter their title. It was then that his famous ritual was born: impalement. This method had long been used by Ottoman executioners, but Vlad turned it into a sinister symbol. Dozens of bodies towered along the roads like a bloody forest, warning anyone who dared to disturb the peace. He silently contemplated this exhibition, knowing that the people, steeped in fear, would become obedient, and the enemy would become pensive before taking another step forward. Complaints from abroad were not long in coming. Hungarian magnates, papal legates, and Saxon merchants whispered that the Wallachian prince had turned into a monster. But the numbers spoke for themselves. Crime in the country had fallen to an all-time low. A merchant could leave a bag of gold in the middle of the street and find it untouched when he returned. Rumors circulated that Vlad himself placed gilded cups in street wells to prove the inviolability of the order. Outside Wallachia, terrifying legends abounded. He allegedly impaled the children of traitors, boiled traitors alive, and nailed the hats of Turkish emissaries to their skulls for disrespect. Where was the truth and where was fiction? It no longer mattered. Everyone believed in his cruelty. Vlad crafted his mythical fame as carefully as he did his state decrees. He did not need a luxurious court or a large army. He needed fear as his universal weapon. The Ottomans watched all this with growing concern. The boy hostage they had freed from his chains now controlled a strategically important region and had no intention of paying tribute. He rejected the Sultan's demands, humiliated his envoys, and most audaciously raided Ottoman villages across the Danube. Villages burned, garrisons retreated, and he said he was acting not as a bandit, but as a symbol of defiance. Step by step, a war was brewing, ultimately led by his uncompromising will. Even the Sultan who conquered Constantinople trembled at the mention of the nickname Ceapesch, for behind it stood a man who had turned war into pure hell. Mehmed II, the young sultan who ascended the throne of the Ottoman Empire in 1453 and conquered Constantinople at the age of only 21, was not accustomed to tolerating stubbornness. When the Wallachians refused to pay their old tribute, and on top of that killed his ambassadors, the Sultan did not hesitate to gather over 100,000 men under his banner. Powerful muzzle-loading iron cannons made by the Master Urban, elite Janissary infantry, Turkmen cavalry in light armor, and 100,000 beys on horseback. Military chroniclers noted that the campaign took on the character of a pilgrimage, with tens of thousands of Turks and Balkan allies following behind, ready to tear out every last bit of resistance. But Mehmed did not know one thing. He was not marching to a battlefield, but into the very heart of a nightmare. Vlad III Dracula, nicknamed the Impaler, was no ordinary military leader. He grew up in the barren forests of Wallachia, where every ravine and every gorge knew his hunting trails. According to legend, his father, Vlad II Dracula, a member of the Order of the Dragon, taught his son wisdom and cruelty. But the young Vlad went further, turning fear into a method of rule. Ceapesch did not wait for the city walls to be besieged. He spread rumors of his imminent cruelty, then ordered the evacuation of all villages along the Ottoman advance route, leaving only deserted farmsteads and dead silence. The wells and springs were poisoned with a mixture of lead ore and the rotting corpses of livestock, the poor creatures that had been driven from their homes. And along the road leading to the Wallachian capital, Târgovişte, on the orders of the Wallachian prince, a forest of black masts dug into the ground sprang up. The bodies of captured Turks, bandits, deserters, and even local traders were thrown onto the poles. Their torn faces with their tongues hanging out in the sun became living, terrifying messages. This is what awaits the rebellious. Mehmed marched forward, not daring to retreat. The heat mercilessly scorched the wheels of the carts, the soldiers suffered from thirst, and the horses collapsed from fever. At night, strange moans and whispers came from the forest, as if ghosts were wandering across the field. Many were seized by panic, and even the hardened janissaries began to refuse to go out on reconnaissance. Finally, under the cover of a stifling June night, the Ottoman camp was destroyed at the very fence of Târgovişte. But instead of the familiar line of fortifications, the Sultan saw what would later be called a forest of gallows and thorns. More than 20,000 bodies lined up in a neat dead army on wooden stakes. Men, women, children, slaves, and warriors. Every corpse swaying in the wind screamed with the language of cruel art. The stench of death was so thick that many Turks felt in their hearts as if they had already been buried alive. According to the chronicles, Mehmed turned as white as the pads in his tent. For the first time, the great conqueror was faced with something that could not be overcome by storming or negotiation. It was not just a defensive tactic, it was a warning. You will enter here, but you will not leave alive. And then Tepes prepared his finale. In complete silence, accompanied only by the muffled sound of the footsteps of his fanatically loyal militia, he entered the enemy camp. Several hundred warriors clad in animal skins glided between the tents, slitting the throats of the dozing sentries and setting fire to the canvas covers. The wind fanned the flames, chaos erupted amid the screams, and the Ottomans, in a panic, hacked at each other, unable to distinguish friend from foe. Only with the first rays of the sun was Mehmed able to break out of the ring of fire, leaving behind the stench, smoke, and thousands of corpses. In the morning, embers still smoldered in the scorched field, and Tepes disappeared into the shadows of the forest like a mirage. The Ottoman army, broken not so much by the sword as by terror, turned back. Many historians believe that it was not military tactics that stopped the campaign, but fear of the unknown beast of war. Vlad won, but the price was high. His despotic methods alienated his neighbors. The Hungarian king Matthias Corvinus, who had previously supported him in secret, began to fear the spread of terror. Pope Pius II, who praised the courageous defense of Christianity, whispered about the bloody prince. In Wallachia itself, the nobility grumbled about the merciless reprisals. Vlad remained alone in his grim grandeur, while his brother Radu, the handsome, educated in Istanbul and inclined toward diplomacy, gradually gained strength and sympathy, becoming the ideal alternative to his executioner brother. The promise of order proved more terrifying than sabers and cannons. Mehmed II, a master of political intrigue, understood perfectly well that it was not always necessary to go into battle to break resistance. Sometimes it was enough to promise safety and peace. With the support of Ottoman troops, his protégé Radu the Handsome crossed the Danube and entered Wallachia in 1462. Many boyars, exhausted by endless raids and the cruelty of the former ruler, went over to his side. The people, weary of fear and merciless executions, began to wonder whether Wallachia could ever become an island of peace under the iron fist of Prince Ceapesch. Vlad the Impaler, who once struck terror into the hearts of the Turkish janissaries and became famous for thousands of stakes, realized that he was not as invincible as he seemed. He was forced to flee to the Carpathian Mountains, where he found refuge with King Matthias Corvinus of Hungary. But the promised help never came. Instead of being welcomed as an ally, Vlad was arrested and imprisoned in the damp dungeons of the royal fortress near Visegrad. German merchants from the Hanseatic League and Hungarian diplomats, frightened by his reputation as a blood drinker and seller of his soul to the devil, insisted that this madman remain in prison. Even the most courageous warriors did not want to take on the burden of defending him. And so, the man who had once challenged the Ottoman Empire found himself in chains among his own allies. However, the gullible Tepes did not consider himself defeated. He was merely biding his time, remembering that monsters do not die in dungeons. They merely fall asleep. While Vlad endured his heavy chains, the fate of Wallachia remained uncertain. Fearing the return of the unsubdued prince, the Ottoman Empire put Radu the Beautiful back in power, turning him into a puppet and keeping the region within its sphere of influence. Meanwhile, in the corridors of European politics, from Vienna to Rome, alliances changed faster than the weather. Mutual obligations hid ambitions and fear of the Turks. But the name of Vlad the Impaler was on everyone's lips. For some, he was a symbol of the yoke of foreign rule. For others, the embodiment of inhuman cruelty. His own ears only fueled his desire to return, restore his power, and bring order to Wallachia in his own image. Finally, in 1475, after long and tense negotiations between the Hungarian court, the papal curia, and a number of Western European powers, the chains were removed from the prince. Once freed, Vlad Tepes set off through the forests of Transylvania to the ancient capital of Târgovişte, where both fear and hope awaited him. Many remembered the bloody executions, but no fewer appreciated the order he had established, a rarity in turbulent times. Ceapesch's second reign was a continuation of his first era of power, but with even greater determination. He vigorously strengthened fortresses throughout Wallachia, from the legendary Poenari on one of the spurs of the Carpathians to Târgovişte on the plain. The army was reorganized. It now included mercenaries from Dalmatia, who were well acquainted with Ottoman tactics. The prince restored old ties and concluded new agreements with Hungary and some Italian city-states, which saw him as a bulwark against the Turkish advance. But treachery never sleeps in the corridors of power. Some of the Wallachian boyars, having lost respect for their former privileges and frightened by harsh punishments, began to plot in secret. They found allies in Radu the Handsome and Sultan Mehmed himself, who were plotting behind the prince's back. A quiet civil war broke out in the valleys of the Argus River and in the passes of the Carpathians. Quick ambushes, poisoned rumors, night attacks on caravans. In the midst of this chaos, the name Ceapesch resounded throughout Europe. His enemies spread legends of countless stakes along the roads to reinforce the fear of their own allies. But behind the formidable image of a ruthless executioner stood a man accustomed to paying a heavy price for loneliness and betrayal. Each victory was accompanied by a terrifying spectacle. Stakes were driven into the ground along the road from Bucharest to the capital, sending a clear message to those who dared to defy him. However, constant war and the duplicity of the boyars mercilessly sapped the prince's strength. The Ottoman Empire did not forget its stake, Radu the Beautiful, promising him support in exchange for betrayal. Slowly but surely the game was up. The boyars, who had been so brave at the beginning, increasingly whispered in palaces and monasteries, seeing in Ceapesch's reforms and harsh punishments a direct threat to their status and privileges. What do a medieval prince and a cult vampire have in common? Vlad Tepes was born in 1431 in the heart of Wallachia, between looming empires and the never-ending struggle for the Balkans. His father, Vlad II Dracula, was a member of the Order of the Dragon, founded in 1406 by King Sigismund of Luxembourg to protect Christianity. But he himself was no stranger to political intrigue. From an early age, Vlad understood that life here was decided not by crowns, but by swords and treachery. When he was just 11, he and his younger brother Radu were sent as hostages to the court of Sultan Mehmed II in Constantinople. This 6-year captivity became a university of cruelty for the young prince. He saw how a garrison order was ruthlessly established, how fear and discipline turned people into instruments of power. It was there, under the arches of the Maiden's Tower, that Vlad learned that the main language of strong rulers is an iron rod of fear. Returning to his homeland in 1448, he immediately set about strengthening central power. The prince seized land from rebellious boyars and distributed it to the poorest knights in order to create a support base from those who were not afraid of weapons or duty. He built roads, put an end to bandit raids, and impaled officials as an example, an ancient practice borrowed from Byzantine chronicles that became a symbol of his direct rule. However, the old boyars did not forgive the prince for his harsh measures. Their betrayal coincided with the ambitions of the Sultan. Mehmed II, remembering Vlad's refusal to pay tribute and his daring raids on Ottoman garrisons, considered Wallachia a rebellious province that should be returned to the rule of the Porte. The conspiring boyars invited Vlad's brother Radu, known to the people as Radu the Merciful, to take the throne, and together with select Turkish troops, he marched on Târgovişte. Prince Vlad had no intention of surrendering the throne without a fight. His name inspired fear and respect among his loyal warriors, who were ready to die for their ruler. In the battles, the coastal plain was covered with the bodies of traitors, and the clang of swords and spears sounded like a death sentence for the traitors. But numerical superiority and growing distrust within his own army gradually undermined his chances of victory. In one battle, surrounded by enemies and deprived of support, Vlad III was captured and disappeared into dark dungeons, where no light from the chronicles penetrates. The fate of Vlad's last days is still shrouded in mystery. Some chroniclers claim that he died in a fierce battle, and that the Ottomans left his body torn apart by Turkish sabers. Others speak of a public execution, while still others say that he lived out his days in a dungeon, where neither the wind nor the cruelty of the world could reach him. Only one thing is clear: the prince ceased to rule, but he remained forever in memory. His name became a symbol of the fierce struggle against external threats and internal corruption. Legends about Impaler, the executioner on a stake, spread throughout Europe, embellishing his exploits and horrors until, at the end of the 19th century, Bram Stoker was inspired by their dark aura to create Count Dracula. But behind the fictional vampire was a man hardened by captivity, scarred by tribute and betrayal, who believed that fear was the ruler's most powerful tool. Vlad the Impaler fought at the intersection of light and shadow, between justice and cruelty, between man and monster. His reign was an endless test of the strength of his authority and the price of revenge. Today, his name still echoes in the history and culture of Eastern Europe, reminding us that the fine line between hero and tyrant can be blurred in an instant, as soon as power ceases to be restrained by humanity. He inspired terror with his name alone, but his actions were guided by a clear goal: to protect his people and his land from enemy threats. Vlad III, the Impaler, Prince of Wallachia in the mid-15th century, is often portrayed as a bloody tyrant, but behind his cruelty lay a clear political strategy. Born in 1431 in Sighișoara Castle, he learned about court intrigues and the horrors of Turkish captivity from an early age. His father, Vlad II Dracula, belonged to the Order of the Dragon, a Christian organization created to defend against the Ottomans. After his father and older brother were murdered in 1433, Vlad and his brother were taken to Constantinople as hostages. The years in captivity forged in him an unyielding will and a burning determination to avenge his family and protect Wallachia from external enemies. Despite his reputation as a despot, Tepes considered his mission righteous. When he first ascended the throne in 1451, the principality was mired in internal strife. Local boyars, nobles, stole grain, opposed the central government, and secretly conspired with the Ottomans. Vlad hastened to carry out reforms, strengthening the power of the prince and convening the voivode council less frequently to reduce the risk of conspiracy. He streamlined tax collection, introduced strict control over the actions of landowners, and abolished the excessive tolls on the roads that had been a burden on the common peasants. The boyars rebelled, and in 1452, Ceapesch was expelled by supporters of the hereditary nobility. However, just a year later, he returned with the support of King Matthias Corvinus of Hungary and seized power again. During his second reign from 1452 to 1454, he clearly demonstrated the power of fear. Thousands of spiked stakes were erected along the roads, forcing travelers to think twice before committing a crime. This tactic not only frightened the local boyars' henchmen, but also served as a warning sign for Turkish scouts. In parallel with the internal purge, Vlad relentlessly repelled the raids of Ottoman troops. In 1455, he dealt a crushing defeat to the Turkish army in the Arjas River Valley, dispatching the enemy columns faster than Sultan Murad II could gather reinforcements. Thanks to these victories, Wallachia temporarily became a buffer, protecting Christian lands from further advances by the Gunpowder and Crescent. However, behind the scenes of military successes lay personal tragedy: separation from his family, Constant attempts on his life and betrayal by his closest associates gradually took their toll on the prince's psyche. Once exiled by the boyars, he knew that he was held on the throne almost solely by angst, fear. And this made everyone who approached him a dangerous enemy or potential traitor. Over time, the vicious and heroic images of Vlad III the Impaler merged into a single myth. Travelers and diplomats from Central Europe told terrifying stories about chains and spikes, and later legends about his superhuman strength and cruelty spread among the people. Admiring his unyielding nature, some saw him as a defender of the Christian West against the Turkish invasion, while others saw him as a ruthless executioner whose methods struck fear even into the hearts of his loyal comrades. The second half of the 15th century gave the world a literary image of this controversial figure. In 1898, Irish writer Bram Stoker, inspired by rumors about Vlad the Impaler and the mysterious name Dracula, a descendant of the Dracula's dragons, created one of the most famous characters in the history of the Gothic novel. Although Count Dracula became a purely fictional creature, he inherited from the real prince an element of power over fear and the image of an invincible defender of his homeland. Modern historians carefully studying the surviving chronicles, diplomatic reports, and chronicle collections are trying to separate fact from fiction. Today, we know that Tepes was not a mindless killer. His strategy sometimes resembled the special operations of a medieval commander, where cruelty was a tool of intimidation rather than an end in itself. He built fortifications along the Danube, set up temporary crossings for quick raids, and established ties with the Venetian Republic and the Papal See. The death of Vlad III the Impaler in 1483 is shrouded in mystery. According to one version, he fell in battle with the boyars. According to another, he was killed by the Ottomans during another raid. Nevertheless, his fame lives on to this day. For some, he remains a symbol of the fearless fighter for Wallachia's independence. For others, a grim archetype of a medieval tyrant. And the legend of the ruthless prince who stood between the Christian world and the advancing Ottoman Sultanate has forever proven how thin the line is between hero and villain. What breaks a person more, unbearable pain or the lonely cold of a stone wall? In the dungeons of old Constantinople, this question echoed with every clang of chains. Today, as we remember Prince Vlad III, we are not just talking about the cruel torture that exhausted him in Ottoman captivity, but also reflecting on the terrible price of power. At the end of the 16th century, when Sultan Mehmed III was consolidating his power, the young prince spent many months in the cold dungeons of Topkapi. His body was not only tortured with iron chains, but also subjected to daily interrogations by the janissaries under the palace arches, where every whisper on the walls could cost him his life. Among the pale faces of the other prisoners, he saw a reflection of his own hopes and fears, the very ones that had once led him to the golden throne. This story teaches us not only about the fragility of the human spirit, but also about the eternal battle between light and darkness within each of us.